All right, we can get started. I want to say hello to everybody. I guess Happy New Year is in order. This is our first webinar of the new year. Appreciate people being online with us today. For those that we might have some new board members on here today. This webinar, really, when we started this during COVID, it was an opportunity not to hear MASB talk at you about things, although we will do some of that, but really to give you a venue to share thoughts and pointers. And if you're dealing with a problem at a district and you're looking for feedback from others and how they address it, this is that kind of place to be able to do that. Safe space that we create so that you can ask questions and we can ask those of you. And so make sure you avail yourselves, use the chat function. If you have questions, either for myself, Brad Banasic, our legal counsel, is on. Jen Smith, our director of government relations, is on. They've got a couple of issues they'll touch base on today. I wanted to get started. Really, I think about we're sitting in January. We've got the new year started. Hopefully, after the November election, many of you started onboarding and orientation with new board members. You're continuing that into January and probably beyond. And I would just be interested in, for those that are willing to share, if you've been onboarding new board members, either some positives that are going on there that you feel good about, some things that you may have questions about, like, hey, we've encountered this. Any suggestions from anybody? I may end up getting crickets, but I'm going to throw out that question and be any onboarding stories or questions that you might be willing to share that will help others that are on here today.
I'll
Leslie.
jump in. Hey, good afternoon again. So I was reelected, so we only added one new board member who is currently onboarding, and we are preparing for our annual board retreat this coming weekend. So far, I know she's met with the board president, she's met with the superintendent, and at our last meeting, I mentioned to the entire board the desire to have our board return to being an honor board status. And so the board president has allowed me to have some time during the retreat to go over all of the award levels as well as the new certifications. I also recommended that we each member bring our own personal development plan to the table to discuss and just to plan ahead for the entire calendar year. That's something that I'm used to having happen over the course of the years. I've been on the Southfield board, not as formally, but I do want to see that we move towards that in a more formal way. I do believe that we have to remain educated at the board level and increase and enhance our development, especially as we look for, because our board has, we've allocated a certain number of funds per board member for professional development, for conferences and things like that. So really looking to be more intentional as we're spending the money, as we are deciding on which conferences we want to attend, which courses we want to enroll in, having a focus and not just going for the sake of travel.
I appreciate that, Leslie. And to that end, just like I appreciate you going out and talking to your board about the going back to honor board status and the focus on PD. And for your new board member, clearly, and you're likely aware, but we do have the Winter Institute on February 7th and 8th. That's completely virtual because Michigan's weather is what it is. The nice thing about those, they are virtual classes, but they are not asynchronous. So you will be there with an instructor. There will be built-in times for interaction. So they may not be quite what it is for some people to do the in-person, but definitely this will be a personal interaction, which would be good. And the other one is, I know a lot of the ISDs right now are hosting 101s, offering that class across the state. I was just talking to an ISD last week and on kind of on the eastern side of the state. And they didn't have very many people from their ISD actually in attendance, but they had people from other school districts and other ISDs coming in and taking 101 there. And so I would like make sure that if you're looking on our calendar and you see whatever it is, I'll say Saginaw ISD is hosting a 101 class, it doesn't mean that if the only people that can go would be people from Saginaw ISD. Those classes are being offered. They're open to any MASB member. And so if you see one that fits, or if you have a new board member that see one that fits, they can come to our website, register for that class, and attend that. So just be aware, particularly that 101 is such a foundational class for that new board members to like get them just started, right? You don't want them 6 months into their first term before they've really got into that. We did launch was it last Tuesday? We had our first new board member webinar. We had about 75 people on that last week. We have another one coming up in February. The February one is going to be on governance standards and roles and responsibilities. That's an hour long. That's free. We have let all new board members know about that, but sometimes, depending on the email address we get from the district, sometimes it's good for you as seasoned board members to mention those opportunities for them as well. But Leslie, I loved what you're doing in Southfield and what you're trying to get the whole board back to. So other people, conversations about onboarding or or questions that you might have. I think I saw one pop up with as well. Larissa is doing a great job as always on putting information in here for you on your resources. Kurt, any advice from the MASB team and veteran board members on this webinar for the newer board members as they hold their organizational meetings this month? Lessons learned, best practices, legal input. Great question, Kurt. People want to chime in and just share whatever wisdom you have with new board members that they may not, they're just not aware of, right? We don't know what we don't know when we start on a board. And I know there's a lot of seasoned veterans that are on this webinar. If you have anything in that area to share, that would be welcomed.
Hey Don, I can make a few points on that.
Yeah, Brad.
Some of the questions I've been getting on organizational meetings. One question that's been frequently popping up this month is, can a board member be nominated for an office when they're not going to be there? I've had that question multiple times, and there's nothing in the law or parliamentary procedure that indicates that a person has to be present in order to be nominated for and to accept a nomination and get elected to an officer position. If you're going to nominate someone who isn't going to be there, Robert's Rules of Order generally requires you just know that you need to find out that that person is going to accept the nomination. So there should be some confirmation from the absent board member that they're going to accept that nomination. If they're not going to be present at the board meeting, they can either share that, with the superintendent or share it with someone who is going to nominate them. Another issue that comes up is the voting process for electing officers, particularly when you have more than one individual nominated for an office. And it can create an awkward situation when you have two individuals, let's say, nominated for board president. Both of them can be outstanding board members and well qualified for that office. And if you follow the traditional practice of voting on the first nominee first, then you're kind of putting your board in a situation of voting no, for one of your colleagues, which is kind of awkward, whether it be for a veteran board member or a new board member. So what I suggest that under those circumstances, if you have multiple nominees for one office, do what I call a roll call election, where you go through the roll call of the board and each person gives their identified, preferred candidate. Then you're voting for a candidate rather than voting no against someone's candidacy. And then if you get 4 votes through that process, then the board can pass a motion to elect that person to the office, and hopefully that would be a unanimous vote. And if you use that process, both the first vote and the second vote both need to be open and transparent and recorded in the minutes.
Thanks for that, Brad. Ruth, I saw you posted that you can add a little bit to the conversation about for new board members. Maybe we can come back. Sally, you had a question. Is there any resources for boards as we navigate potential deportation, students, family members? I have not encountered that, Brad. I don't know if you have seen any of that. And if you are districts that have seen any resources, throw them in the chat or raise your hand and we can talk about that. I have not seen something specific. I know I just went on one of the national websites that I was thinking of and didn't see anything there either. But Brad, any thoughts on that?
I know the National School Boards Association, in collaboration with the Council of School Attorneys at the national level, have put out some guidance on possible deportation issues related to students. I will try to track down the link for that and put it in the chat. But if you're interested in that, shoot me an email. I'd be happy to pass that along.
And if you're,
I would check with your central office if you've got like a mental health coordinator or something like that, because I know there is a training out there that a lot of them have been doing online about potential deportations, how to handle students, how to handle staff, how to handle if ICE comes to your building. So there's a training for those people, but they wouldn't be your board. They would be within your central office or maybe in a counselor in your building. So you might want to check with the superintendent, see if anybody's doing that.
thanks for that, Jen. Any other districts that have encountered resources in that area that might be useful? Stan, I just see you posted an article from Colorado school districts.
Yeah, that just popped up in my Google search yesterday. I know it's not from Michigan, but it's something.
Yeah, school board member, I mean, wherever you are, like it's just how are districts thinking about handling situations and I mean, Michigan does have a significant immigrant population. Southeast Michigan, West Michigan, clearly an issue for school districts in Michigan to be prepared for and wonder how to address that in advance. And, hopefully your administrative teams are scrambling themselves to find this information on their own, as that's kind of their role in this. But at the same time, I think it's anytime a board member can find resources and share it with the district and with parents that have it, that's useful to do that. Larissa just posted guidance from the NEA as well. Any other stories on the kind of the onboarding orientation space, that success or lack thereof? I will say we have an article coming out in Leaderboard this month, our magazine, which you'll all be getting. And it's a great article from a district. Now, this really dates back to onboarding 2 years ago, but it's a really good article about, we all encounter people that run for our boards that as individual board members, we think, oh, we're not going to agree with them. They're going to be difficult on the board. And this, the article that you'll find in the magazine is really about how a board president really mentored and built onboarding and orientation with a member that I think they were expecting to find a lot of difficulty, and through real diligence, we're able to get to a good space. Not on agreement for everything, but definitely in a good space regarding that. So, Mark, the answer is yes, and it'll be out, Jen, tomorrow, you said, right?
Yes, it'll be in dashboard tomorrow. It'll be up on the website later today.
And we'll have Jen touch base on that a little bit too, Mark. Dr. Early, I see you had your hand up.
Yes, hello everybody. I wanted to say one of the things that we did, we actually developed a committee that created an onboarding process for all of our new people, because we knew we were going to gain 2 new board members this year. Like our board is structured so much different this year because our board president was voted out. And so now, since he's gone, we not only had two new people, two returning people, we had to vote in a new board president. And so I just want to say and toot my own horn and say I'm the first Black female board president of East Point Community Schools. And so,
Congratulations.
thank you. And so we're dealing with a whole different situation. Now we had a board member who resigned her seat, which was the wife of the board president. And so now we're in the process of having to pick a new board member in the 30-day period because she just resigned. So we got one thing after another, and now that very president put his name in to be reelected.
Oh, interesting.
We dealing with some stuff now because the community said no, and now he's only one of two people who wants to come and be on the board. Help me.
Well, if you run into any questions on appointment, we all know that Brad is our resident expert on following all the rules for appointment and telling you, like in this case, that you don't have to pay. I mean, this sounds bad, but I'll say you don't have to pay attention to what the voters did or didn't do in an election when you're doing an appointment. You can make the choice to do it or not do it. Normally, it's the other way. You hear about people that do we pick the person that took third place now that there's a vacancy? And the answer is you don't have to, but some districts feel very compelled to do so if that was the next highest vote getter. But Brad can answer any questions that you have in that area. You can reach out to him in this window, and hopefully it all works out the way that you want it to.
I will be reaching out to Brad because we need help.
I can assure you, I've already talked with your administration on a lot of the vacancy issues. So that they have our vacancy guide, and I think they will be equipped to assist you in filling the vacancy there. But if you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to contact me.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I know that we do have some newer board members on here. And so we keep talking. Somebody will say, Brad will say, email me, or just, so if you go to our website, we do have a form where you can click on our name, fill out the form, and it'll come to us in an email. But I also will tell board members that are on here, our email addresses are standard email addresses that you would anticipate. First initial, last name at masb.org. So clearly, if you don't want to use the form, you can see what Brad or Jen or my email would be, just with our first initial plus last name at masb.org. So you can get directly to us. We get the form immediately as well, but sometimes it's easier to give you the direct contact information as well. And I wanted to offer my congratulations to Sally on being the first person of color on the Granville Public School Board. That's great news as well. Let's see. I just wanted to touch on a few other things, and I let Brad do some talk. So I did mention it. We were right at the beginning of the webinar. I was talking to Mark Katz. He's got the Capitol in the background behind him. Jen is leading a big group, somewhere around 90 school board members and superintendents, out to the NSBA Advocacy Institute in a couple of weeks to be able to spend some time having school board members and superintendents advocating on Capitol Hill for priorities for Michigan and for schools in general. That's always a big event for Michigan. Our members turn out well, and coming in after an election year, being able to interact with newly elected people out in Congress and out in the Senate has high value. So know that that's just happening. Also, I mentioned the CBA classes. I mentioned Winter Institute. I think this week we're starting our series of 4, what we're calling our Winter Learning Series. It's 4 webinars, hour-long, low-cost, on topics that we feel would be relevant to board members. I think school safety is our first one here in this month. Something to consider. We're trying, we at MASB, we're looking, right, we offer in-person conference. We offer many of our CBAs online with a live instructor, in person and without instructors. And so we're just finding what learning opportunities fit for every board member, right? So we do webinars like this that are no cost, that are just conversations. We have some that we charge for, and we know people love in person. And so we do the mix. And it is our way to just try to reach you in the way that you see fit. And so take advantage of however works best for you. Let's see, Leslie, can you speak to board members engaging with the community in casual type events? So I'll talk and then I'll see if Brad has any other guidance from a legal perspective. You know, Leslie, I think from a best practice standpoint, like absolutely, as board members, you're elected to represent your communities. Being out in the community at sporting events, at band concerts, at whatever you're at, you know, board members should engage with their community. They should listen. I think the key that I always tell the board members is following the kind of the culture of your board, and that can vary from board to board, but you are typically the conduit when a citizen comes to you and has a conversation. You're bringing that concern or whatever it is to the administration for them to address and allow either them to get back to that person or in some cases for you to get back to that person. But you are typically, boards are not the individual problem solver, because it's like, yep, I'm going to follow the channels, the chain of command. Like if they come in and they want to talk to you about their child and a building principal, you can be like, I can lift that up to the superintendent, but like, that's not my job to solve that. We have to make sure we follow the procedure. But, you know, I think it's exactly the role of a board member to interact with their citizens. Brad, I'll let you chime in. And then there's lots of seasoned board members that I'm sure have insights on how they approach interacting with board members too.
What about I'm sorry, real quick. What about hosting? So several board members have spoken about maybe doing coffee and chats. I personally have always done like family game night type of things, but I've done them through other organizations that I'm a part of within the community, just because I have smaller children and have been able to bring families together in that way. And so we've kind of, over the years, people have had different views. And so that has come up again. So I'm just wondering, I hear you saying listening. And in the past, that has been the role I've taken on, never there to solve any problems. But I think community members have appreciated being able to come in a real casual way, a game night, coffee chat, and just kind of talk about their concerns. So, of course, going to the events that are happening in the community, but actually hosting.
I'll let Brad tackle it first, and then I'll chime back in maybe.
Sure. Yeah, and that's the context I get this question in most often is so, you know, local board members, they see members of the legislature having what are called coffee hours, you know, with their constituents, and they're wondering, okay, can I do that as a board member? And you certainly you can. What I emphasize is just compliance with your bylaws and policies. You need to be 100% sure, you know, what your policies and bylaws indicate on those type of events. And what I would advise to the district is the district completely take a hands-off, you know, approach to an individual board member doing that. That's the board member's own thing. The district shouldn't be involved in that whatsoever. But if you're going to do that as an individual board member, you emphasize, I am one of 7. I have no more legal authority with serving on the board as anyone else here has tonight as an individual board member. The board acts as an entity, not as separate individuals. So certainly, you know, you can share concerns here tonight, but you know, I'm always going to be advocating that individuals go to board members, you know, or go to board meetings to share their concerns that are of a concern to the entire board and are a concern to the entire district, rather than trying to go through individual board members. But with that said, you know, nothing wrong with board members having informal events to talk with their constituents. it gets a little bit wonky if you got 7 board members doing that and you're having seven different individual events with board members talking to their constituents. But still, I guess that would be permissible.
And Barbara, I see your hand, and I'll get to you next. In that vein that Brad just talked about too, Leslie, like one of the things, like, and I agree with everything he said, a couple of just cautionary pieces. One is if a person comes into a board meeting and makes a comment, that's recorded, it's in the minutes. We know that there's a mechanism for follow-up. Any person coming in and talking to you at a coffee hour or something along those lines likely has the same expectation, but there isn't a recording secretary. Things could like fall by the wayside, or not you, but depending on, we do know board members run sometimes on agendas. And so do they not follow up on something that one person brought to their attention because maybe they didn't agree with that sort of thing? Like there is some risk in that space, where if it's at a board meeting, clearly that does not exist, right? That's being recorded, and whether you like the question or not, like it's going to come forward to the administration and to the rest of the board. And the other piece would be like, this gets back to that culture of the board, and Brad talked about policies. Like when you have a board that's all getting along, individuals together or separately can have these office hours, and you're bringing it back to the board or to the administration, and it all works well. You get one board member elected to the board that really, let's say they don't agree with the majority of the board. Now they go out searching for comments in these office hours. There's not another board member there to like say, oh yeah, I heard that question. Like it works well when it works well, but it can also go sideways depending on the situation. So I agree with Brad that I think the best for real concerns, I would always direct citizens to come to a board meeting and share that, to make sure they get their kind of, I won't say due process, but making sure that they're heard. Barbara Annis, you had your hand up.
Yeah, hi, thank you. One thing that we do with our board in Rochester is we do a chat with the board half an hour prior to any formal business meeting of the board. We have members that if they're available before the meeting formally begins for that half hour, they will show up. Obviously, no more than 3 of us. Sometimes there's just 2 of us. And we invite citizens to come and speak with us in that regard. So it's a lot less formal than coming to the mic in a formal board meeting. But we also, whomever is the board member that's participating in the chat with the board, we ask that during board member comments, they share publicly who came to chat with the board and whom they spoke with, and what the issues were, so that it becomes part of public record.
Thanks for that, Barb. That was helpful. Brad, 2 follow-up questions from Coben and Robert that I think you can address and make sure that I don't say the wrong answer.
Yeah, clearly at any type of event where board members are going to be, if a majority of the board is going to be there, you can't start engaging in deliberations relating to school district business. That there are some exceptions to the Open Meetings Act that permit a quorum of the board to be together. One of the bigger ones is for social gatherings. So if a quorum of the board attends an athletic event or a fine arts event together, that's fine. But if you have 1 or 2 board members that have scheduled one of these informal listening events and 2 other board members show up, yes, clearly there's a risk of a quorum of the board deliberating on a school district business outside of a public meeting, and that would be problematic. So the next question, am I correct that you're going to invite public into your home as a board member? You cannot leave someone out. If it's just one individual board member inviting folks over, no, you can I guess pick and choose who you want to be there. That's not a public meeting. If it's a quorum of the board and it's a posted public meeting in a private residence, yeah, then clearly everyone has a right to attend that. But if it's not a gathering subject to the Open Meetings Act, all the public doesn't have a right to attend.
Thanks,
So
Brad.
my question on that was, the young lady that had spoken, she said that they have family game night for other times where she has smaller kids and would invite public over. I was just kind of looking at it as, if you have these two people over and somebody else wants to come over who's a problem, doesn't that kind of fall into like your social media as well? I mean, doesn't that cause an issue, or couldn't it?
Yeah, I understand where you're going with that, Robert. So
Or am I
if you
just reading
create
too far into it?
no, yeah, you might be. If you create a public forum, right? And when you create a public forum, so your school board meetings are public forums. They've been created as public forums by your legislature, so you can't exclude people from your school board meetings.
Right.
My opinion, having a board member just invite citizens over for a game night is not creating a public forum. Um, under the social media analysis, where the court has determined that social media pages are subject to being a public forum is when you have a board member that's actually engaging in school district business. They put themselves out there as this is a school district or a school board social media page, and as an individual board member, I have the authority to be making comments on this page and to be making declarations on behalf of the board. So there has to be some authority attached to that individual board member in that scenario. I just don't see the analysis applying on the same basis when you're inviting folks over to your private residence.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Brad, there's a question on public comments and taking minutes.
Let me track that down.
From
Should
Kiara.
public comment state put word for word? No, that's a great question. So what you could do with public comment with your minutes is essentially put in the minutes, the board received public comment, no action taken. There is no obligation to identify individuals who speak during public comment. There's no obligation to try to summarize or paraphrase what those individuals said. But if you're looking at it from a pure legal perspective, that's all you have to put in the minutes. The board received public comment. Now, your minutes, beyond what are required under the Open Meetings Act, are kind of dictated by local policy, right? So your current board may not be agreeable to that. Your board may want more detail in the minutes to kind of show the community that, yeah, we care about what you're saying, and because we care about what you're saying, we're going to be more specific in what you say in your minutes. So that's kind of the reason for going that way with it. But it comes down to being a board decision, what the board wants the minutes to say in regards to public comment. So, and I think that's a great issue to bring up at your organizational meeting. Look at what the minutes have indicated in the past for public comment, and if the board is happy with how those minutes reflect public comment, then continue with that. But if there's going to be a change, I think making that change at the organizational meeting would be appropriate.
Thanks for that, Brad. And I also think, in that same vein, like with more and more boards recording like their meetings, if you have a policy or a cultural norm that you do record public comment and minutes, it doesn't have to be word for word. If you can tell that person, we have a recording of it, so that allows our administration to go back and really check specifically if we need to. So we're just doing a summary, right? So it's not like you've got coverage if you're doing a recording. And I would think most of your citizens, because trying to do word for word in public comment, even if you as a board think it's the right thing to do, that becomes pretty difficult to make sure you get it exactly right. And as Brad said, there's not a legal purpose behind it. So it should be, okay, what do we need as a district to get the information we need out of that public comment to either follow up, giving them an answer, whatever it might be. But I can see where a person would push and be like, well, I would just wanted to make a statement and it wasn't about a solution, and they just want that statement listed in the minutes, but
And then a quick follow-up to that, Don, if in that situation, if you have a member of the community that's not happy with what's reflected in the minutes, then their recourse is to reach out to an individual board member and try to get that board member to amend the minutes at the meeting at which the minutes are being proposed for approval. And then the issue goes before the board as whether those minutes should be changed to be more detailed for that individual and their public comment. So that would be the back end of it.
yeah. Or if they read off of a piece of paper, you may ask them, could they share that so that you could get it more accurately done because they had it in writing or something like that already. All right, good feedback and go back and forth. All right, Sally's already posting a question. We're keeping you busy today, Brad. Social media pages.
Yeah, so as I indicated, there's some legal precedent on this issue. This issue went before our Supreme Court last year, and the Supreme Court essentially set a rule on when board members' social media pages are going to be subject to, we'll say, constitutional restrictions. So the issue is, okay, you as a board member have a personal social media account, and you use that social media account to provide updates to the community on the going-ons of your Board of Education. And then you get feedback from community members, and maybe you get some negative feedback from a community member, and it becomes a little bit more invasive to you, and you decide to block that person. So by blocking that person, are you violating the First Amendment? Because have you created a public forum with your social media page? What the court determined is that a board member only creates a public forum subject to the First Amendment with their social media page if you as an individual board member have authority to be making comments or speaking on behalf of the board while using that social media page. And when you hear that rule, what should come to your mind is board president, right? Under your board bylaws, the board president is the spokesperson for the board. The board president can sometimes act on behalf of the board by policy. So if your board president has a social media page and they're using that for school board purposes, then yeah, that page may be subject to constitutional limitations, and the board president would have to be very careful in how they're censoring comments or blocking individuals from that page. Outside of that example, I can't, see other social media pages being, subject to that rule.
Thank you, Brad. Follow-up question on minutes. Review the level of detail needed in closed session.
What I provide as a guide on closed session minutes, your closed session minutes should at least give enough information to show that you were legitimately in closed session. So if it's ever challenged that the board was illegally meeting in closed session, you can show the judge, here are minutes. The minutes clearly show we were in closed session to discuss a written opinion from our retained legal counsel. And the minutes reflect that. Thus, we were legitimately meeting in closed session under the Open Meetings Act. So they don't have to say a whole lot. However, in some specific circumstances, you may want them to be more detailed, particularly when you're dealing with maybe a staff termination or maybe a student expulsion. If you're in closed session for an expulsion hearing, you want at least the minutes to show that the student received their appropriate due process in that hearing. So, let's say the student's 16, and then once they turn 18 after they've graduated, they come back and sue the school district when they're the age of majority. You want those minutes to still show that the student received their due process, so you can defend that claim that the student was inappropriately disciplined, and you'd be able to show that, okay, our minutes do reflect the student received due process.
Thanks, Brad.
Hey, you're welcome.
Let's see. Sue is throwing up a question. Our district has a policy that states teachers must use the chain of command for internal issues, and we have had educators written up for talking to board members about things they feel passionate about. If a teacher's issues with an administrator or even the super, what other recourse do they have and how should a school board member handle those teacher contacts? Directly to the board president, should we consider a policy change? That's a Brad question, I think.
So I wouldn't recommend a policy change. So yeah, this is an issue that comes up on occasion, and obviously, the board's one individual. Your one employee is a superintendent. That's kind of what we say in our classes, and the concern of having staff members go to board members directly is that that could encourage micromanagement by board members to start getting into personnel matters where they need to go through the administration rather than directly through the staff. So I would say still follow your policy. Now, as Don indicated earlier, it's okay to have informal conversations with members of your community, and if those individuals are teachers, they're still members of your community as well. However, emphasize that you need to follow policy in engaging in these communications, and if it is a matter that involves a complaint against the superintendent, then you likely would go through the board president to see if that should be an issue for a full board consideration. Maybe the board president and that one board member would meet with the superintendent, and then they would discuss this complaint that the board member has received, and then based on that conversation, maybe it would be put on a subsequent agenda for the whole board to consider if need be, or maybe there would need to be an investigation approved by the board as well.
Thanks, Brad. Stan, I see you have a hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Don. I just wanted to follow up on the closed session minutes. Unless I'm mistaken, the law allows us to destroy the minutes of a closed session 1 year and 1 day after the closed session takes place. Brad, did I hear you indirectly recommending that we not do that when you're talking about defending ourselves against the suit from somebody coming back after they've attained the age of majority?
Yeah, that's a great catch, Stan. In that case, I would say, yeah, I would not destroy closed session minutes that detail a controversial expulsion. When there's a risk of that student coming back and suing the school district when they reach the age of majority. Now, closed session minutes that relate to maybe the superintendent's evaluation or collective bargaining strategy, those type of minutes, yeah, they can be destroyed. But as you indicated, that's not a mandate to destroy those minutes. It's just that you're able to destroy the minutes a year and a day after the open session at which the closed session occurred, when those open session minutes have been approved. So yeah, that's what I recommend. If it's a issue that could subject the district to litigation, you might want to keep those closed session minutes until the statute of limitations run on that particular legal issue.
Fascinating. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Amazing. 12 years, still learn something new every time I talk to you.
Brad, I think I could answer, but I'm going to let you do it too. When you have 5 current board members conducting meetings to fill 2 open seats, how many board members can meet after the meeting is adjourned, and would that be considered a quorum?
So when you have 2 vacancies, your quorum goes down to 3. So you could have a meeting with 3 board members. You can take action with 3 board members. And in that case, if the board members have been appointed but have yet to file their acceptance of office and take the oath of office, arguably the quorum is still 3 at that point. So once a meeting is adjourned, if 3 board members remain after the meeting, those conversations should not involve any school district business. They should be discussing football, whether it be the college playoffs or the NFL playoffs or any other thing that's on their minds, beyond school district business.
Yeah, and Brad, when I saw the after the meeting is adjourned. And I know, like, not as much, but I have heard from boards that, a regular occurrence for boards is, hey, at the end of a meeting, we're going to go to the local pizza place and just kind of hang out and just, build relationships amongst us as board members. And like in that case, they aren't conducting school district business, and it's okay for them to be a majority of the board together after hours, as long as they're not going down that road of making decisions. And that's a hard, like, people see you out there and they like, when did you make this decision, sort of thing. So I think that it's risky, but I know people that do it.
In fact, Don, I'm aware of a public body, it wasn't a school board, but a public body being investigated on that very issue. And the investigation involved wait staff from the restaurant, where these board members were going before meetings, and they were asking the wait staff, "Did you hear these board members talk about any county business while they were eating dinner?" So it sounds kind of silly, but that's how that issue was investigated by local law enforcement to determine whether there was a violation of the Open Meetings Act there.
Yeah, be careful what we wish for, I guess, as elected officials. All right, we're at 12:47. Brad, I know you wanted to touch base on Title IX. I wanted to give Jen a little bit of time just to let people know about the priorities a little bit more than she did a few minutes ago, but I'll let you touch on that Title IX case.
All right, so we had a significant Title IX case decided about a week and a half ago. If you've been following the Title IX saga on the 2024 regulations, there's been a lot of litigation involving those regulations. And in terms of whether they were enforceable in Michigan, was based upon whether you were on a list. A school was on a list that would been rated under a court case where Moms for Liberty would submit a school to be on this list, and then the 2024 regulations were not enforceable within that school. Well, this most recent case vacated the 2024 regulations on a nationwide basis. And the court determined that the Biden administration overstepped its authority when it sought to enforce a new Title IX interpretation through the rulemaking progress. And if you've been on these webinars, I think in a previous webinar I've mentioned this case that rescinded the Chevron doctrine. And this doctrine used to give deference to administrative agencies on how they interpreted federal laws. Well, since this doctrine is no longer being followed by courts, courts are going to start interpreting the federal laws rather than the executive agencies. And that's exactly what happened in this situation. This federal judge interpreted Title IX and the term sex to just cover biological sex and not cover gender identity or sexual orientation. So that's why the regulations were vacated, because those regulations emphasized that sex was going to cover gender identity. Now, what's interesting about this case is that while it applies on a nationwide basis with the regulations being vacated, so they're not enforceable in any state right now, the analysis doesn't apply. So it wasn't a U.S. Supreme Court case, so there isn't any binding rule or analysis in this case. So while the 2024 regulations have been vacated, court cases interpreting other non-discrimination laws are still binding on Michigan school districts. So districts are now going to be in a place where you still want to follow your policies on non-discrimination relating to gender identity and sexual orientation. So encourage you districts to contact your policy providers, ensure that you have the proper policies in place to not only comply with Title IX, but the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, which makes sexual orientation and gender identity protected classes, and then also those binding judicial decisions that are binding in Michigan, whether it be through the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals or a Michigan court that have upheld anti-discrimination protections based on gender identity. So this issue is going to be fluid. Courts are going to continue to issue more decisions on the matter. Eventually, we'll get a Supreme Court case. But this is the time when you really have to rely on your policy provider to ensure that you have your proper policies in place.
Thanks, Brad. Clear as mud.
Yeah.
Jen, let's touch base on priorities, kind of where they stand. I know you did a little bit, but just kind of share with the folks where we're at.
Well, we did all of our meetings last year. That sounds weird to say. We had a great turnout on the survey, not so great in the in-person meetings. So we're going to keep working on that next year when we do these. But the board approved the priorities on Friday, so they will go up on the website today, and they'll be out in detail tomorrow in dashboard. There's not going to be much that will surprise you in them. It's a lot of funding-based things, looking at the School Finance Research Collaborative, looking at unfunded mandates, making the school aid fund pre-K to K-12 again. And I mean, that's been an ongoing priority probably since 2010 when they first made the loan. So 2012. But it may take on some extra importance this year as they try to rewrite all of our transportation funding. We may run into other issues with the school aid fund as they pull more fund out of the general fund, more money out of the general fund. We also talked in the priorities about standardized testing and the amount that students have to do. And then, of course, the staffing shortages. And so we took last year's priority about teacher staffing shortages and just expanded it to include all staff, especially bus drivers. So acknowledging that the staffing shortage is not just our teachers, it's in every part of our building. So it's sort of the same priority as last year, just on a bigger scale. They will also, if we have a news from the Capitol this week, which is up in the air, depending on if the legislature actually does anything, we'll include them in there too. But you'll definitely have them in dashboard and be able to find them on the website.
All right, thanks, Jen. Brad, let's see, 12:53, other topics that we didn't cover today that you might have a question on or a comment on. This would be the time for you to throw something else up there in the chat. I've appreciated, man, there's been great questions and conversation today, just from folks asking the questions that are on your mind right now. And that's what we do this for. It's not for us to decide what you're interested in, but for you all to bring that forward.
Hey, Don, there was a question on emailed public comments. I'm not sure
I
if we
missed that
addressed
one.
that. Yeah. My thought is on that, Leslie, you're not required to accept email as being a public comment. That can be seen as board correspondence. And if it's sent to the president, then the president determines whether those comments should be presented to the board, whether it be via public comment or otherwise. But I'm kind of a proponent of limiting public comment to being there in person in the meeting. If you go beyond that for public comment, well, you're kind of going down a slippery slope. And that may really create more. Not to say public comment is bad, but if you allow for email public comments, you just don't know how much you're going to get there. And then there's the issue of time wise, do you read it? Do you just put it in the board packet? If you read it, is it just limited to 3 minutes, just like everyone else? I think just the easiest way to address public comment is you have to be physically at the board meeting to address the board.
Yeah, and I don't know if that question would fit for you because I'm unaware of the requirement for threat assessment employees in each building.
So there's a bill that probably is going to be signed tomorrow, 5659, 49. I'm starting to fade on my last session numbers. It requires a threat and risk assessment team in each building, but that team is made up of current employees. So it's not new people that you have to bring in, except for including law enforcement in part of the team activities. So it's not a new person, it's the people you have, it's an administrator and a counselor. Um, and in each building or in each district is a question that I got to go back and look at the details. But I do know it's not hiring anybody new. It's using the people you have. Some districts already have a team like this. They may just have to rename. Because that was part of our working on the bill is to make sure for those districts that have taken those steps, they don't have to start over. So it's pretty broad to allow if you already have a threat assessment team, a risk assessment team, or whatever you may call it, if you rename it into this and do the same thing, then you're covered under the law.
Thanks, Jen. Appreciate that. Um,
I think there's a question, that one question, Don, from Joe. I think that it involves electing officers. If the board wishes to keep the officers on the board the same, and have new board members serve as trustees, majority rules. Someone can make a motion to elect the previous officers to be the officers for this upcoming calendar year, and if that motion gets seconded and a majority vote, then all your officers are the same for the upcoming year.
All right, thanks for that, Brad.
Yeah.
Well, for those that are new, we always try to respect your time as you tune into these, to keep these from 12 to 1, so that if you're working, you can get back to work and do your thing. As always, you can always email Brad, Jen, me, or anybody on our staff when you have questions about school board issues, things that are going on in your district. That's what we're here for. So avail yourself of that opportunity. We do the Member Matters webinar every 2 months, I believe, is where we're at on this one. So we will be getting information out when we do the next one. But I'll just say thank everybody for attending today. Tell your other board members to participate if they want to. I always like to see new faces and have more people to share information and feedback to your fellow board members. I'm just looking at a couple things. Brad, there's a phone number. Joe needs to give him a call. Kiara, as a new board member, nothing sounds stupid. So ask whatever questions that you have. When during the board meetings can a board member bring up concerns or topics that they want to discuss, such as ideas? Brad, typically it's board comment period for most boards, isn't it?
Well, I recommend actually amending the agenda on that, Don. If there's an issue that a board member wishes to add to address in a meeting, the best way to address that is to make a motion to amend the agenda, get a second, then a majority vote. Sometimes boards don't have board member comments on agendas, so but I guess if they do, then you could bring it up at that time as well. But if it's an issue of substance, I recommend going through the formal process of amending the agenda.
And I do see Leslie posted to their board. They have a board matters section and for good of the order. So if it's not amending the agenda, they could also bring it up there. So. All right. We are at 12:59. I want to let everybody go. Thanks for all the questions. Make sure you send others. If you have them, we'll get to you individually. Jen and Brad, thanks for answering all the questions that you did today. And hope everybody has a good rest of this month and into February.